Hey there, I'm Kathy with the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm, and today I have a problem, and I don't know what to do with it. So, in all my preparations and stuff, I have food storage in a couple of different spots, you might say. I have some freezers, I have some shelf space, but my 2 chest freezers are now full. You can see behind me, there's some blackberries, and I want to have more blackberries in my freezer. But I have chicken and hamburger and pork and all sorts of other good things in my freezers for sustenance in other ways, along with things like strawberries and blueberries. And in one of my freezers, I got it specifically when my sheep came and I had to have one of the sheep, we'll say, disposed of. I had a ram that came to me that was not exactly the nicest of rams. And because I wanted to have peace in the neighborhood, so to speak, amongst the sheep, I had this 4-year-old ram sheep slaughtered. I'll put it that way. And so instead of having him go to complete waste, I thought I'd use some of his meat and bones for the dogs and dog food. And so that's what the intention was. So I had most of it, about half of it, is in bones, stew meat, what they call offal, the organs. But then I had another half of it done into ground sausage, in Italian sausage. And so I thought I'd try it that way. The sausage wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for, but I still have the rest of the meat. And so today's job, in part, was to do dog food. But the other issue was that I'd also gotten some food from a friend who's moving. A good friend of mine, and she and her husband decided to sell their home that's just local to me. And they had been building a house out in, I believe, South Dakota. And today was the last day in their home, and she had a bunch of things in their freezer and then their refrigerator that they decided to share with me, which I was really grateful for. But I don't have enough room in my freezers. So I have to do a little bit of Tetris in my freezers. But I decided to share with you guys some of the things that I thought I'd do today with some of the things that I had in my freezer and in my food storage. So come along and help me solve this problem of having not enough freezer space. So as you can see here, this is one freezer, and it's a mite bit full. And I am free now. I just barely put this dog food in, 4 quarts of them. I think 1, 2, 3. No, this one only has 3. Nope, it is 4. So there's 4 quart-sized bags of beef, sweet potato, and pea dog food that I now have freezing here. But a friend of mine was moving, and she ended up giving me a bunch of stuff that included halibut, and I'll tell you what I did with the halibut in just a moment. But these are frozen hazelnuts, or we also call them filberts here in Oregon. And then she gave me some frozen red raspberries and some peas and a whole host of other things. But this is part of my problem. I have all my other things that I've been freezing, like other food storage, like hamburger and blackberries that are coming in, and yum sauce for stuffs. And see, over here in this freezer, I got more stuff, and this is about as full as I can get this little chest freezer. And on the top, you can see I ended up making more dog food. So this is lamb and sweet potato, and then over here is the haddock or the halibut and brown rice dog food that I just made today. So I have to shift around my stuffs in my freezers to get more room, but I don't know what to do. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actually something for me. This is something I call tater tot casserole, and you might have heard it before. But basically, I used what I call a chub of beef. Now, in this particular recipe, I am actually doubling it because I want to share it with somebody else as well. But so this is what my meat looked like. It's just in one of these, and just so you know, if you ever get one of these, the sell by date or use by date is usually on this white line. You can kind of see there's some printing right kind of by my finger. And this one happens to be, it says best if used by 11/9/22. Now I have had this a little while, but because it's been in the freezer, it can last longer. So I took 2 of these chubs out of my freezer and sauteed them up for this tater tot casserole. But in addition to that, I have 2 of these mixed vegetables and some tater tots, along with, so simple tater tots, along with I have a cream of chicken soup and a cream of mushroom soup. Now all of these things I had in my food storage, either in my pantry or in my freezer. But then I also have these little handy dandy loaf pans. And again, food storage. This is my other storage, my non-food storage. And before things get sort of out of hand, because I'm outside with the wasps, I'm going to start mixing it together. And so, like I said, pardon the waving, I have to do this to keep the wasps out of the way. But as I mentioned, I've already sauteed up my my meat. I drained off the excess fluids, and now all I'm going to do, besides waving away the bees or the wasps, is I'm going to put in my 2 cans of soup. And this is just the straight soup, okay? And if I had that yen, I probably would rinse this out a little bit, but you don't need to. And in this case, I have actually, this is going to be a job with the bees and the wasps and stuff. It's actually more wasps than bees. So my bees are over there and they're doing their job. These wasps are being a pill. And so, again, I'm just going to open this up. And I happen to be using 1 can of cream of mushroom and 1 can of cream of chicken. That's only because I only had 1 cream of chicken. And so, as I'm trying to get these out of here, it's a real nightmare here. Generally speaking, you don't want to be in this place, but for some reason these wasps have been coming even inside my kitchen today. It's a real joke. Now that I have the soup in there, I'm just going to mix it all up real quick. And before they get too far, just get them out. I'm going to open up my bags of mixed vegetables and dump those in as well. So now that I'm dumping these in, I want to make sure they all come out of the bag. Now, part of the reason, like I said before, why I'm doing a double batch is because I want to be able to extend this out and be able to actually refreeze this and use it for kind of easy meal prep. And all I have to do, once I mix this up, then put it in my little loaf tins. So I'm going to mix this up really well. And as you can see, between the meat and the vegetables, it's kind of come up a lot. So this will go a fair amount. One part of this recipe, so 1 chub, 1 pound of meat, plus 1 bag of vegetables, and 1 can of soup, all mixed together, is the half recipe. But if you do that and put it in an 8x8 pan, that is 1 serving, and you can plunk it in your oven tonight, and then put it in have it for dinner. Now that I have this all mixed up, I'm just going to take my pans, and I generally go to the second pan first, just because I kind of want to make sure that's kind of clean. So then I put in a little bit, maybe not quite half full, but about that much. And then I simply put my tater tots kind of in an orderly fashion on top. And I kind of like it to look neat and clean. So you can see I just put it in 1 at a time. So in this case, I'm looking to do about 12 tots on the top. And there you go. That's 1 serving. And so now I'll just do the rest of these. I'll just fill in the rest of these, and I'll plunk them in the freezer. You can actually put them in the freezer, or you can cook them up right as it is and bake them up in your oven. So some of the next things that I mentioned earlier in the video is that I today decided to make dog food, and I ended up making 4 types of dog food. Most of it was out of lamb, some was out of beef, and some was out of fish, and I'm making some right now that's in the process that's chicken. And basically, any basic dog food that if you want to make it yourself, you don't want to really add seasonings. There are certain vegetables you don't want to add, but the basic premise is, and this is from veterinarians, you want to have a protein, starch, and a vegetable. So like, for example, I have a dog, Yarsan, who's a yellow lab mix that I got from China, and he has some problems with ear infections, that they're yeast infections. And the veterinarian said, okay, anytime you need to make sure you switch his food, because you want to make sure that it's not skin or a skin allergy or something else, you need to change the protein and the starch. So like, for example, if you have your dog on, say, I don't know, a lamb and rice, based dog food, then you might want to change to, like, say, fish and sweet potato, or venison and legume, which is what I just switched to myself. So I have my dogs on a kibble diet, but I also decided to add some fresh food. And so in this case, I today was making very basic, we might say wet food. And so like in this case, this one is, and I just blended it all up. You can actually still kind of see the peas in there. Basically, that was beef, sweet potato, and pea. And so I just cooked up my beef in my oven. You can say it's oven roasted sweet potato and pea. and that's all it is. And I added some water to it to help kind of puree, and I kept the juices from the beef in with it, and I just blended it up in my blender and put it in my bags. And that's as simple as that. The chicken, I'll show you here in a minute. It's boiling up in my crock pot, and it's simply the chicken and water right now. And that's going to go a real far way because of the way I've prepared it, or just the nature of what it is, having a whole chicken and water. So another one that I did, actually 2 variations, is a lamb. I got a lamb stew. And this is literally stew meat, and so lamb. So because of the sheep that I had butchered, he was actually 4 years old, and by definition, that is now no longer lamb. So when you're looking at lamb, it's 12 months or younger. There is something called a champagne lamb, which is, I believe, 4 months or younger, and that's a little bit more tender and more. It's a little more specialized item. But anything over the 12 months is considered mutton. And so that's what this guy is mutton. And so I shouldn't say lamb stew, I should call it mutton stew. But just because of what I've worked in, I just generally call it mutton, or lamb in this case. But in this case, I did 1 batch of what I call lamb stew, where I put in literally the stew meat, carrots, and celery. And then I added some water, let it perk, and I put it in the crock pot again, got it tender, and just blended it up and put it in this case, gallon-sized bags, because that's just what I grabbed. Then I made a second batch of lamb food, or lamb dog food. And this time I just added something a little different. Same premise of organ meats, lamb stew, and I put chops in there too. I wanted to get some of the draw some of the marrow from the bone, some of the stock from the bones in the juices of this dog food. So I had, in both of these, I had chops, stew meat, and offal. And remember, offal, it's O-W-F-U-L, not A-W. So offal is the internal organs of a given animal. And so that I added the liver, heart, kidneys, that sort of thing of the lamb into each of the batches of lamb dog food that I did. So the lamb stew has all sorts of good things. The beef and sweet potato has all sorts of good things. And then the chicken is actually another one that I'm doing, and that one right now is just perking, and I'll be adding carrot. What am I adding to that one? I believe I'll be adding brown rice and green beans and celery. And so, but that one I'm going to also freeze up some of the, well, I may decide. So it's going to definitely be the chicken, but I'm deciding whether or not to freeze up some of this chicken stock and maybe just do like a chicken stock and rice one to make it a little bit in case my dogs get sick. Because remember, sometimes our dogs get sick just like we do, and we want to be prepared for them as well. And having something as simple as chicken stock and rice will help settle their bellies, and you don't need to give them their other food with that. It's a soft, easy thing on their stomachs and helps them get better. But again, where am I going to put it? So I got to do a little Tetris in my freezers to make sure this happens. So when we think about what we're putting aside for food storage, we should think about how we use what we put in our freezers, but then also how we use what we have as a whole in our pantry. So this is where the other thing my friend ended up giving me, my friend who's moving gave me this big old liver. And basically this is from, her husband goes hunting and he has friends that go hunting too. And I believe she said that this was from a deer, which I was like, that's kind of big. But she suggested, while this is frozen right now, it's going to go back in the freezer until I can do a freeze-dried setup for this, because she said that's good for dog treats. And we both have dogs, and she suggested having this basically cut up, you freeze it, let it thaw just enough to then cut through it in nice thin slices and freeze-dry it to then give to your dogs as treats. And it keeps all the good stuff that the liver is for your dogs, but just in a different form. So that's another way to add to your food storage, is by doing freeze drying. And almost thankfully, a friend of mine, a neighbor, has a freeze dryer that he's offered to let me use, and some other people, to see how we like it. And so I'm going to ask him if he can help me out with using his freeze dryer and this liver for dog treats. This has been perking on high for the better part of the day, but I stole some of the broth for some of the other dog foods that I've made, and so I want to make sure that this is fall apart tender, and I'm actually going to be using this to extend the farthest of all the dog foods. And all I have in there are the two, as you can see, the two chickens and water. That's all I did with this. Because it's for the dogs, I didn't want to kind of add too much, but I will be adding other vegetables. I'll be adding some celery and something else. Green beans, so that I can have a little bit of produce in there. But I'm going to be using the broth as well as the meat from this, but I'll be taking the bones out when it's all kind of cooked through. But I'll be adding water to this to help with the stock, and I'll probably add some rice to the overall final product for the dogs. But in addition to this, basically I got everything from my freezer. Those two chickens were in my freezer. The water just out of the tap. The green beans I got from my friend. They were frozen green beans plus some celery that was fresh, and that's what I got from my. That'll be another addition. So now that you've kind of had a sneak peek into my problem, and I have to joke that this is a rather first world opportunity problem. We have an opportunity here to be able to have a whole host of things if we just plan things out. And I do feel very fortunate to have a stash of goods in 2 chest freezers that are full. That's a good problem to have. But at the same time, when we know that there's things coming down the line, whether it's a health issue or a job issue, We want to make sure that we are set up and prepared in the best way that we can. We could even have weather problems, you know. So the best solution to my problem is to be able to have a diversification of food storage, I think. So somehow I got to figure out not only how to tetrify my freezer, but how to then use what I do have in my freezer to make it shelf stable. So like you had seen, we made tater tot casserole. I'm going to be using some of it, the liver, and freeze drying that. I could be picking my blackberries and freeze drying some of those now that I have some in the freezer. I could also be canning some of the soup stock that I make, and that's one of the other things that I have in my freezer is sheep bones. And so that's something that I could use the bones to make lamb broth or some stew meat, or not stew meat, to make broth out of, and then can that in a pressure canner. So that helps alleviate some of the space in my freezer that way. But you can also use it on a regular basis and rotate it through your stocks, or I could. But being able to use a combination of things from your pantry for food is kind of a good way to go. And as you saw with the tater tot casserole, I used my meat and tater tots along with some vegetables that were all in my freezers, along with some soup that I had on my shelf. And then I went even beyond that and used my non-food storage, by using the plastic bags to put the dog food in, but then also to use my loaf pans that I had bought for something like this tater tot casserole for single serving use. So again, having all these things stocked up for use really kind of helped me out. I just had to go and take the time to use it and to do it. So I hope this video has helped you kind of see some different ways to not only what to store, but how to store it, and then how to use what you're storing to best serve what you have. And now that we have our, all of our fruits coming on, I want to make sure that I have whatever fresh produce I can stored up in the best way possible. And like I said, with my blackberries, diversity is the name of the game. And you may have seen in past videos what I did with making blackberry pie filling. In fact, I'll try to link it around somewhere. The other video I did on making blackberry pie filling, which it's the time of year to do that. And so it's the time of year for blueberries, for peaches, and that's a whole other issue that I've come across. Peaches where I come from right now are sitting at $51 a flat. And a flat, if you don't know, is basically about a 2 foot long box by about 12 inches by about 3 inches. And so that's kind of pricey for about 12 to 15 peaches. And so we have a lot of things going on in this world where we have, finances going all sorts of sideways. So yet another reason to kind of do some food storage is be able to get what you can with what money you have in the season that it comes, and then be able to put it up as you can. In my case right now, the best thing I can get are my blackberries. They are literally steps from my back door, and they are free. And I have bags to put them in and to freeze them. I may ask my friend who has a freeze dryer to help me freeze dry some of those for a little bit different storage. But again, I could also do the canned pie filling, or even jam, or even blackberry cordial. So those are some different things. So that's 4 different things that I can get with my blackberries that are free. And they're a variety of different things to be stored. So I hope this has helped you see kind of some different things that you can be getting and storing as we speak. And if you have the opportunity to get something free like blackberries or peaches, maybe you can even plan for next year and start planting some of these things in your yard or in your apartment building, that you can get a couple people together and have a kind of a garden space with some trees or some bushes where you can have blueberries and strawberries and all that sort of good stuff. So thanks again for stopping by, and if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button And you can also check out the line of journals that I have on Amazon, and I'll put that link down below in case you're interested. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for coming by the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm. And if you'd like to leave a comment down below as to what you've been doing lately for preparing, I'd be interested in hearing what you've been doing. Thanks again for stopping by.